on Sunday named Gary should be acknowledged for having given me some parting gifts. I got a couple of albums. Remember those things called albums? From a group called the El Dorados. I'm yet to transfer those on a format we can play for you, but we'll do that. They're a doo-wop group. And he also gave me a number of CDs. He also gave me a beautiful card. Dear Larry, on your memorial radio program dedicated to your brother Kirk, I was very happy to hear what an Elvis fan he was. Me too, along with millions of others, he says. I am a member of the rock and roll generation. I was 14 years old in 1956, Elvis's most explosive year. Did Kirk ever get to Graceland, especially for Elvis Week in August? I missed giving you these things last time you were here in Rockland, so I'm giving them to you now from myself and for your many fans and listeners in the Sacramento area, signed Gary, in memory of your brother Kirk. So if Gary is not listening, I'm sure many of you know who Gary is. Please tell him that I acknowledge that he gave me these gifts and how much I appreciate it. No, my brother never did get to Graceland, but his wife did. I don't know why they weren't together that day, but Trista went to Graceland. And when she was there, she said she even saw Elvis. He was upstairs as they were going through his house. Nor did my brother ever see Elvis in concert. I did, in Las Vegas. And I used to rib him about that. I said, Kirk, you're a big Elvis fan. How many of us have actually seen Elvis perform live? He never did. Anyway, Gary, thank you so much for that. God bless. One more thing about this election being stolen in 2020. I was asked that, as I said over and over again, please tell me the relevance of that regarding this election. And by the way, I was reamed by the media because briefly on the electelder.com website before the election, I think a day before the election, it said something to the effect of, we lost the election, it's because the election was stolen. I'm paraphrasing. I didn't put that language up there. Vendor did. We promptly took it down. It shouldn't have been up there. But I wasn't conceding, nor was I saying that I lost because of the election having been stolen. Were there some shenanigans? We know there were. There were some reports on local news about some guy having 300 ballots in his car, about a bunch of people, all of whom appear to be Republicans, who showed up on election day and they were told they'd already voted. I'm not saying there was some sort of conspiracy. Don't tell me things did not go wrong. But again, why this became an issue? Because the media conspired. I don't mean they had meetings. I don't mean they sent emails. Conspired with my opponent to divert attention from the issues because they wanted him to remain in office. Was the 2020 election stolen? Do you believe 2020 was stolen? And I said, just one time. Just one time. I'd like you to ask my opponent, Gavin Newsom, if he believes 2016 was stolen. Just one time. And if he doesn't believe it was stolen, please ask him whether Hillary's social media platform should be shut down, the way Trump's were. Trump's were shut down after January 6th, the so-called insurrection. By the way, you've lost me at the word insurrection. But Hillary, for 4 years and counting, to whoever would listen, referred to Donald Trump as illegitimate and said the election was stolen. Can you imagine had Donald Trump referred to Barack Obama as illegitimate and said 2008, 2012 had been stolen? Are you kidding me? She said it over and over and over again, and you guys didn't say squat. Now, Chris Cillizza, who is politics editor at CNN, went nuts over a poll that showed 76% of Republicans believe the 2020 election was one of, quote, widespread voter fraud, close quote. There hasn't been a 1,000-page investigation about 2020, by the way. But that 76% is a lower percentage than the 78% of Democrats who believe the Russian interference, quote, changed the outcome of the election, end of quote, even though the 1,000-page Senate report reached no such conclusion. Why hasn't Hillary had her social media platform shut down? Why hasn't anybody raised this? And if you're going to ask me about 2020, why don't you report what I asked you about 2016? Why didn't you ask Gavin Newsom if he thought 2016 was stolen? Hillary certainly does. To the point where, again, 2/3 of Democrats falsely, incorrectly believe that the Russians changed vote tallies. Again, Senate report, the Russians tried, don't get me wrong, but they failed to change a single vote tally. Talk about believers in conspiracy theories. 66% of Democrats, however, believe that they did. But Donald Trump is purveying the big lie, and anybody who believes that the 2020 election was rigged, as Molly Hemingway puts it, is a brain-dead conspiracy theory, knuckle-dragging, brain-dead conspiracy theorist. Talk about double standards. Now, the former coach of the New York Knicks, Jeff Van Gundy, has slammed Kyrie Irving, the NBA superstar who refuses to be vaccinated. Quote, sometimes common sense is in short supply, end of quote. Mr. Van Gundy, how much damage do you think LeBron James has done by suggesting the police engage in systemic racism against black people? Something that has caused the police to pull back, to engage in passive policing. Fewer stops, fewer arrests, crime up, often dramatically, in places like New York, Chicago, Los Angeles, San Francisco, Oakland, Newark, and elsewhere. Why? Well, if you're going to accuse me of engaging in systemic racism, why in the world should I do anything other than respond to radio calls? Did you ever suggest that LeBron James lacked common sense because the studies show the opposite of what he's saying? Of course not. Are you kidding? Spike Lee, a regular feature at New York Knicks games, has even done commercials with the NBA, speculated that George W. Bush blew up levees during Hurricane Katrina. Did you ever suggest that Spike Lee was lacking common sense? Of course not. Now, some 18,000 so-called migrants have been released into the interior, many of whom are positive for COVID-19. By the way, Joe Biden is not mandating that they be tested, by the way. So Ted Cruz has a proposition.
You know, you see rich Democrats basically saying to Texas and the rest of the country, oh, you silly people, you shouldn't worry about this. And they say this while they're at their fancy enclaves, while they're whining and dining. Well, I've introduced legislation today in the Senate. It's called the Stop the Surge Act, and it creates new ports of entry for these 2 million illegal immigrants. So instead of having 15,000 Haitians under a bridge in Del Rio, Texas, Del Rio just has 35,000 people, its population. That's half the city coming in one day in Del Rio. Well, what my bill does is it designates new ports of entry, like Palo Alto, California, like St. Helena, California, like Yountsville, California, like Greenwich, Connecticut, like Rehoboth Beach, Delaware, like Cambridge, Massachusetts, Martha's Vineyard, Block Island, Rhode Island, Governor's Island, Scarsdale, New York, North Hero, Vermont, and Nantucket. So rich Democrats can be sitting there and suddenly see 10, 20, 30, 50,000 illegal immigrants like we're seeing in Texas on a daily basis.
I'm Larry Elder.
This is why we're fighting.